So I'm Tom Hackett here, and we're going to be learning about the Pololo studio equipment, how to operate it, all the major functions that you're going to need to know in order to be able to do a video shoot here in the studio. So Scott Wong is going to go through the introduction process here to our studio production. Scott, you can see that as we go across the table, we've got a lot of different equipment, but we take it one by one, and it's not too hard to understand. Over here, you've got your teleprompter computer, the black computer case corresponding to the black monitor and keyboard. It's all labeled, so if you get too confused, just look for the label. Teleprompter computer, and then this is also a Compix graphics computer that'll superimpose the video on top of the picture that you're getting from the studio. So those are computers that work the way that you normally use computers. We can go over the detail functions of how those go another time. But let's keep on moving across the control equipment here. We'll go over each piece. Up top, you've got the monitor, which actually will show the same video that someone would see on a teleprompter. This is another monitor here. This shows the video that is being recorded in the studio. This is a very important monitor. It also has some graphs on here to tell how bright the video is, how intense the color is. We've got a speaker that we added to provide more than adequate sound to listen to the recording session here. So that plays the sound for the monitor of the video. And then we've got an additional monitor. This one shows the picture on a traditional cathode ray tube style monitor, but it does not include titles above it. So that's a little different. So we're going to keep on going down here. We've got a DVD playback unit here. This also has a capability to record, but it's used primarily just for the playback. The best thing about using this DVD player is it does not display menu display information on top of your video. So if you hit the play button, it doesn't put play on the screen on your video. So that's why it's very nice to use this with playing back DVDs that anybody might want to bring in and include in their studio production. This below is the Anycast station, which is actually the most important place in the whole studio to get this operating. You need to have this working and understand its functions. So we're going to spend a lot of time on this one a little bit later here. Moving across here, we've got our countdown timer. This is the way that someone inside the studio can see numbers counting down in order to know maybe how much time they have left to record in this session. And it's got some basic controls that will allow us to put whatever time we want on there and have it count down or up, however you want to go. And below this is an edit controller unit, which is primarily just used for another place to look at to see the same counter that is displayed on our tape deck further down here. This unit here is your camera controller. It's like a joystick to be able to control remote control robotic cameras that are in the studio. Further down here, we've got our audio mixer. Audio mixer controls all of the different microphones that come in from the studio, and it also has the ability to adjust the sound coming off of a playback tape deck. So we'll get to the details of that later on. This is the rack of equipment here. I kind of skipped over these two. We don't use these that often. You've got a CD player and a tape deck player. We don't really use those. Mostly if people have a CD, we could easily play it on the DVD player, so we would just go to there. The studio rack of equipment here, you really only need to worry about this one primarily being the record tape deck. This is what you're always going to work with in order to be able to record video on the DVC Pro tape in the studio. And then above it here you've got the Sony DVCam playback tape deck. So if you really wanted to, you could record the playback of a cassette as like a B-roll source in your studio production. And that's pretty much all of the different devices that we're going to use in the control room area here. Let's move on to the next section for our recording. Should we talk about maybe how to use the Anycast system to change between camera angles, or would you want to review what's actually in the studio itself that we work with over there?
I think we should go to the studio, see the cameras first.
Okay, let's go and take a look inside the studio. Okay, so here we are in the studio. We've got our studio lights up. This is the normal set that someone might use to record a talk show or something here in the studio. But in order to get the video, we use our 3 different robotic remote control cameras here. This is the camera that goes with the Sony Anycast system on a tripod. You've got a few cables that plug into the back of each of the cameras, which are important. You've got a black video cable here. This takes the video output of the camera and sends it back to our control room area. And you've got a couple Ethernet cables, which are carrying the control signal for the camera to know how to pan or tilt, zoom in and out. Any kind of camera adjustments come in on an input cable here. The little red label tells me that's your input. And then the other one coming off of here, the blue one, is the output on this yellow cable here. And lastly, you've got the power connection. You got to have that connected up and on. If you don't have power to the camera, it's not going to work. So the output of the control signal goes from the out of one to the input on the next camera. We've got 3 different cameras, so they daisy chain along, and you go output of 2, then goes to the input onto 3. Each Anycast camera, robotic camera, has the video out going directly back to the control system. But that's the way that goes there. And lastly, an important piece of the studio production is the video monitor inside the studio and the countdown clock over here in the studio. This is how someone on the set knows how much time is left to record. We get our countdown clock rolling for them properly. And in order to see what the camera shots are going to look like, you can actually watch what's being recorded here on the video monitor. So we can always line up the camera angles and get everything squared away before we start that way. Any other questions about how this works?
Sound.
Sound. Well, that's a good thing to cover. One piece of sound equipment that we might want to point out is we got a speaker inside the studio. As someone operating the control equipment, you can actually speak to the talent here inside the studio using this speaker. We'll learn that later on, but that does let you talk back to them in the set here. And you have to make sure this is on and that the volume is up a little bit in order to let them hear you. So if you try to talk to them and they don't hear you, it could be that this is off.
Is that what they call the voice of God or the God mic?
God mic. This is the output over here for the God mic. Director being the God in the control room there for the studio production. But let's talk really about the sound that we would want on the recording. You've got your studio lavalier microphone here. And we'll just left it on the chair. But this plugs into an XLR cable down here. And then the other end of the XLR cable plugs into our audio snake. So the audio snake is really just this little box that lets you plug in microphones into the snake and then output the connection into our audio board over in the other room. So I think probably if that's about it for our equipment inside the studio.
One more question on the audio. You guys say that we should limit it to 3 or 4 people? And why is that? Well,
for a typical mini studio production, you want to limit the number of people on the set to really at most 4, because when you get more than 4 people, it's actually kind of awkward trying to line up camera angles with that many people. Mini studio productions work best with just really a host and then maybe 1 or 2 guests. You can kind of squeeze in 3 guests, but when you get to that many people, just how to frame up the camera angles can be difficult. And it has to do more with the space that we have here in the studio.
Rather than the audio.
Rather than the audio. The audio capability actually allows for the use of 8 microphone inputs in our equipment here. You could go normally, you know, more than 4 easily, but it's not a limit on the capability of the equipment. It's more about the studio space that we have to work with.
Understandable.
Yeah, because if you get like 6 people lined up in here, it gets really confusing really fast on how to go to the next camera angle just right. And also, it's going to be really crowded. So it's not going to look as good. So we want the show to look nice, everybody to be happy with the way it's turning out, and do a real nice high quality production as best we can.
Cool.
Yeah. All right, let's go back and go over the control equipment again. We can go more into the detail on how we work with the sound and how we work with the cameras. Because the output of that audio snake goes right over to our audio board over here. Okay. So let's go over the audio board. This is our Sony 8-channel audio board for the studio equipment over here. The way this goes is that the audio snake plugs in on the back over here, and you could actually input much more than 4. You could go theoretically up to 8, but you got to make sure it's configured properly on your audio board with microphones. With a mini studio production, having at most 4 people, you're probably not going to go past 4 mics. So each one of these columns of controls is going to be duplicated across for each of the different inputs on the audio board. So if we really just learn one of these properly, you can kind of take that knowledge and understand most of the controls on the audio board. The last controls over here on the end are just the master volume controls, and then these are auxiliary outputs which are not used. So long as you get your master volume up and the audio board on, just turn your on button on there, then you just have to worry about how to do these controls here. These are like other controls, like doing talkback mic through this audio board, or some other functions on here that you don't really have to learn. Learn how to do one column of buttons and bring the master up and turn your audio board on, and that's really all you need to know. Let's start with the top switch up here. We've got a switch which controls what type of input we're using for this channel on the audio board. You've got a setting for phono, balanced line, mic, and mic plus 48V. So if you've learned how to use our cameras, you already know about the plus 48V for the mic is supplying power to the microphone. The other setting would be microphone input without supplying power to the mic. Right now, I believe all of these are configured for mic plus 48V, with the exception of these last few here being set for not phono, but on channels 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, that first setting says unbalanced line. And on these last two, we would use the unbalanced line setting when controlling the output of the DV cam tape deck over here. Or if you wanted to do maybe a music performance where you might need all of the inputs on their audio snake, then you would want to set those for a mic setting to allow for the audio snake control to work. But this is getting kind of complex. Most of the time you have maybe like 2 or 3 people. You just worry about these first 3 control columns over here. So let's keep on going down the line. You leave this on plus 48V, everything's fine there. The next control is the trim adjustment. This is kind of like a secondary volume control. So right now it's set for like a top dead center, kind of no significant adjustment either way. If the person is coming through too softly, you may want to turn this up. You could go up to like 90 degrees, like almost full volume. The way we had it before is probably fine for most speakers. You can leave it right in the top there. And then this next control down there says LCF, standing for low cut filter. And this is engaged. It doesn't really make a big difference, but the purpose is to cut out low frequency sounds. Again, you're not going to hear a big difference when you have it on or off, but we'll leave it on. It might cut down a little bit of like background noise of like a air conditioner sound, perhaps, if that was on, or wind noise or something. doesn't make a big difference. The next thing down here does make a significant difference when you work with it. These are equalizer controls. Equalizer controls let you adjust the tone of the sound coming through on this microphone. So it's got a control for the high level sounds, high frequency sounds. You can boost or gain the high frequency aspects to the sound. And then you got the mid level and the low level sounds. So if you have someone that has like a really strong like bass voice, you get your Barry White type person come in here, and maybe you think it's a little bit too overpowering compared with the other speakers in the production, then you might want to tone down their low frequency sound, and then they won't come through as bassy sounding. And then you might even boost up their mid or their high at that point, and that would be a good way to make it sound better for your production. The same would be true if you have somebody that comes in as a little bit too high-pitched sounding. You might want to tone down the high-pitched aspects to it, and then maybe boost up the mid or the low for that person speaking that way. You can usually just leave these normal adjustment, top dead center there, and it'll come through with a normal sound to it. So in order for these equalizer controls to be applied and work properly, you have to have this little button engaged. Push it down and leave it pushed down to be able to adjust these. If you have it popped up, then the equalizer adjustments don't apply. So that's how to make them work, is you push the button down. And so we're going to keep going down the column here, and most of the time you don't have to use these top things. So you can just leave them and it'll be fine. But let's just keep going, and then you have a chance to know how these work. You've got your auxiliary output controls with blue and green knobs here that will control sending sound from this microphone to some sort of auxiliary output device. We don't use these normally, so these are down to 0 right now. And then this would be engaging the auxiliary controls there. We don't really use those. But then you've got another control here, the panning adjustment, left and right panning. We don't really use that with the studio here. They're all equally balanced between the left and right channels. But just so you know how that would work, is that you turn it to the left, and then it would put that microphone more towards the left channel, to the right channel. But you can see that we've got everything even. We bring up both the master left and right. Everything's balanced. Don't worry about that. It's all going to get mixed together here for your studio production at Olelo. The next button, PFL, stands for pre-fader level. If you wanted to hear this one microphone, and just that one, over the headset that you plug into this audio board, you could push the PFL button. Since we recommend when you do your studio shoots here that you would be using the headset plugged into the recording tape deck, this doesn't really function as well for you in that way. So people might use that when they want to figure out who's the person that's got the microphone rubbing on their shirt or something. And then they keep pushing the PFL on the different inputs until they find that one that's making the sound they don't want. Yeah, it doesn't work unless your headphones are plugged into the audio board directly. So we can kind of skip over that one. With the simple production with just 2 or 3 people, it's not too hard to figure it out. Lastly, the most important one is your audio level control here. With this audio board, you've got kind of a mid-level setting at the number 7, right with a dark bold line there. And then you can boost it up to 10 or bring it down to 0 to mute that microphone input. If you set it at 7, then it's kind of like a normal volume setting.
That's why they have basically the white line there, right?
That's why you have the white line there.
Okay.
One way which you might be able to use your trim adjustment over here, sometimes people would want to use this in order to be able to set the main control at the normal number 7 setting, and then do your fine tuning for that microphone with the trim knob. Now that's kind of an advanced way to work with the audio board, but if you did that, then imagine you set each person's input at 7, and then you do the fine tuning when the person's a little bit softer or a little bit louder with your trim adjustment. That way, If you're in the middle of the shoot, you could make an adjustment here and bring it down a little bit, and then bring this one up or something. But if you knew that you wanted to go back to the way you were in the start of the shoot, you know you can bring them all back to 7, and it'll be right back to where you were for the beginning. And you don't have to worry about remembering that, oh, this speaker was right at about the 4.5 level, and this other one was at 8.5 or something. And trying to remember all these details is difficult, so that's why you might want to use the trim adjustment in order to get that fine-tuning dialed in. Okay, so I know that was a long explanation, but that's how to do all the controls on our audio board. And with that, you can see how these same controls are applied for each of the different inputs, so you pretty much know how to work all the functions on the audio board now. Cool. Audio board takes the output over here using the master output and sends the sound from the audio board over to the Anycast system. The Anycast system sends the sound from there, bringing it together with the video over to the tape deck. So if you want to check to make sure you have sound for your studio recording, you got to make sure that the audio board is on, your volume for that microphone is on, the volume for the master out of the audio board is on. Then you got to look over here at the Anycast and figure out how the sound comes in here. And it comes in on Anycast audio inputs number 1 and 2. These lights above indicating that those channels are engaged need to be on. The controls over at the Anycast audio stuff have to be up to 0. And then also your master volume for the Anycast output has to be engaged in outputting sound. If you have all those things on and brought up to be outputting sound, then we should be able to get sound over here on the tape deck. Tape deck is off right now. You've got a little on switch in the upper left corner. Turn the tape deck on, and then you should be able to hear the sound coming through there. So that's the flow of audio in our studio equipment here. Let's go over the video side of things now, if that's okay. All right, so you can see on this Anycast system that we do have 3 different cameras outputting video. The video, you can control which one is selected using these 2 rows of light up buttons there. And right now we don't see anything on the program monitor because this button here is red. It's the FTB button, fade to black. And this is like your fade up, fade down button. So red means it's faded down, hit it again, fades back up onto one of the cameras. And you can see as I faded up, now you've got the top row with the red light for camera 2, indicating that this camera 2 is selected for your recording. If you wanted to pick out a different camera to go to next, you're going to want to look to this second row of buttons. This is the one for the preview of what's the next camera coming up. Right now you've got camera 2 selected, but let's pick out a different one. Let's go to camera 1 next. So I hit the camera 1 button, and now camera 1 is displayed over here on the upper display here of the Anycast. It's on the preview section, so this is the next one to come in. In order to change those and have camera 1 be brought over to the program recording side, you have to transition. And that's where our transition controls come in over here. You've got the transition controls. You got a dial. This is like the T-bar or the dissolve throttle control thing here. And we're just moving this back and forth switches those program and preview inputs. So now you got camera 2 here on the program. You want to bring in camera 1. You can just move this and it goes as fast as you go. It'll bring in camera 1 and just dissolve between those two. If you wanted to just immediately jump between them, so now we got camera 1 on the program screen. If you want to jump back to camera 2, you can use the cut function or the auto transition function. In this case, I think we actually wore out the cut button on our Anycast system. You got to do auto trans. Hit that, and it's going to cut back to the other camera angle. So that's the way that you can transition between the different cameras. If you wanted to go to camera 3, you just hit the button on the bottom row. Orange indicates this is the preview camera. Shows up in this preview window with the little orange marker next to it. and that's the next one to come on. So you hit the auto trans, and it brings that right on, transitions it right in there. And it then brings camera 3 from there, and camera 2 from the program before, and puts it over in the preview now. Camera 2 is being previewed. That's the best way to do your changes between cameras. You could hit the button directly here and just change it, but it's not quite as smooth. It'll transition better when you can preview the camera first and then transition to it that way. Does that make sense to you okay? Okay. So better to preview your camera you're going to next and then transition using your transition control. There he brings it in like that. That's the way to transition between camera angles during the show. And then when you get to the end of the show, you might want to fade down on your recording. And that's where you would use your FTB button that we started off with. Your fade to black fades it down, and then hitting it again will bring it back. Okay, so normally we would be doing 3 camera angles, and then you've got a 4th input here. It says cam 4. This is actually where your DVD player comes in. If I turn on our DVD player, we should be able to bring up the DVD menu, or it could play a DVD here, and you can see how that works. Let's pop in a DVD. Let's take a look at one of these here. Let's take a look at the old Energy and Power in Hawaii opening. This is for an old program on Olelo from Henry Curtis. I don't think he's even doing this one anymore, but we can see this for our preview. So I popped in the DVD, and this is going to come up on camera 4. So Scott, would you want to preview camera 4 or DVD player video? Okay, so that's actually got the DVD menu showing in the preview button. Before you go to that DVD, you would want to start your playback. So hit the play button on the DVD player, and it'll bring that in. Go ahead and push that one. Okay, it's playing the video. And you can see on your preview, it's actually got a little bit of a countdown for this video source. So we'll let that thing count down. And then while it's counting down, I'm going to note here that our 6th audio control on the Anycast is actually your DVD player volume. So I bring that up, and then I want to transition into that video. And so I just transition, and it changes from the camera 3 to the input 4, our DVD player video. And it's actually playing the opening for the show that way. And then as this thing finishes, I'm going to want to transition back to the set and bring down the DVD player audio. So I just bring this down and then transition back to the studio. And it's that easy. After that point, we don't need the DVD player anymore, so you can eject it like that. Yeah. Remember that you do have to make sure your master volume is up. You do that in the beginning before you start your production. And then these controls are the output of your audio board. And DVD player is the only one that doesn't go through the audio board. It's controlled with input 6 on the Anycast audio controls. It's kind of because like it's right over here, right by the Anycast. It's easier to make that control from right in front of you there. So that is the audio functions and the video functions. We also have video inputs 5 and 6, which have the capability to input computer video. The computer that someone might use in the set would need to be outputting a VGA computer video signal. And specifically, they got to set the resolution on their computer screen. This is getting a little bit technical, but you got to set your computer output for 1024 by 768 on your pixel resolution setting. And it has to be at the 60 or 75 hertz for the refresh on the monitor there. And if you set it like that, it'll come up just fine, no problems. Sometimes you just plug it in and it just works, which is nice because you don't have to worry about changing anything. But you can always ask the staff for help. But if you wanted to know the numbers again, 1024 by 768 at 60 or 75 hertz, and it'll come up on the Anycast system just fine. In our case, the computers usually always come up on input 6 because that's how our big long cable is plugged in. You can use a VGA cable. It would take it from the control room side, bring it into the studio, and then they can plug in their laptop that way too. So that way you can do a PowerPoint presentation as part of your studio recording if you wanted, and it would just come through on input 6. And that's about it for your video sources here. That's all the controls for changing back and forth. I noted before when we were in the studio that you had the ability to talk to the people inside the room there. You do that using this button here in the middle of the Anycast controls. It's labeled TB. This is the talkback button. In our case here, we hit the talkback button, and then talking into the microphone right here at the Anycast controls let you speak to the people inside the studio. And then hitting the talkback button again mutes your sound so it no longer goes into the studio. But that's a good way to communicate when you don't have to run back and forth as much that way. And then in order to be able to hear them, hear what the people inside the studio are saying, you do have to have their microphones engaged and bring up their volume so you can hear them. So you would probably hear them using your headphones here. Headphones would plug into the tape deck. If you have the tape deck actually ready to play back a tape or playing a tape actively, you're not going to hear what's being said in the studio. It's going to be playing the sound of that tape through your headphones. So you do have to make sure you stop the tape, and then you'll hear the sound coming in from the studio microphones that way. So you do need to be able to hear them if you're going to be talking and actually communicating there. So that's about it. I think that's all I'm going to try to cover here for our introduction on working with the studio equipment. You can spend more time at another point to go over how to use the teleprompter or the Compix title software. But this instruction so far has gone over how to do the video for adjusting the different camera inputs.
How about if adjusting the lighting?
Oh, good question. Yeah. Okay, so in order to adjust the video picture that comes in from the different cameras, you have to use the Anycast camera controller here. Right now, I think I'm only going to cover like the basics of working with our cameras. You've got a button down here for which camera you're controlling. In this case, we got camera 2 selected. So you'll see camera 2 is on the preview of the Anycast system. I can now move this controller left or right to have the camera pan left or right. There is a slight delay. After you push the joystick, it's going to wait just a moment and then start moving the camera. That way I can like whack the joystick easy. It's not going to change anything.
Cool.
But you hold it in place and it starts moving on you after just a moment.
You must have dealt with a lot of me's before.
Okay. But if you wanted the camera to zoom in or out, you go to the top of the joystick, you twist it. You twist it to the right to zoom in. You twist it to the left to zoom out. And then it should be on most normal configurations of the camera control, you should be able to push up and have the camera go up. I think in our case here the controller is inverted, so push up means like you're pushing forward on the airplane style control, it's going tilting down. And then the camera can tilt up or down with the up or down on the joystick here. So this controls camera 2 right now. If I want to control camera 1 or camera 3, you got to select that camera with the controller there. So now I'm controlling camera 1. In order to really see it clearly, you'd probably want to bring up camera 1 either on the preview or possibly on the program. Program means it's actually going out to the tape deck like that, and you see it on the big displays, so it's a little bit easier. I might watch it on the program output when I'm actually setting all the camera angles before starting a studio shoot. You don't want to try to make live adjustments during the recording whenever possible, because you want it to look real nice and clean for your final recording. If you did have to make a small adjustment during the shoot, try to make that on the preview window before you get to that camera angle. But if you set up all your camera angles pretty well in the beginning, then you don't have to worry about that. So I've selected camera 1, I brought camera 1 up onto the program video, and now I can adjust and see it, make that change live on the program output there. So left to right, up or down. Now, how do you make it brighter? Well, that's getting into the actual settings on the camera. And those are more over on the side here. You've actually got knobs, which will let you adjust the different input for brightness. This is getting kind of complicated, but the brightness control right here, when it's set for brightness exposure adjustment, lets you just twist the knob to the right to make it brighter, or twist it to the left to make it darker. So I want to pick out a good setting right in the middle there where it looks properly exposed. And then you got a knob below here for the focus adjustment. Remember, same type of camera things apply, so that if you want to focus your camera properly, you want to zoom in. So you zoom in all the way. You go over here. Oh, it's getting out of focus a little bit. So now if I want to focus it, you can do the manual focus adjustment with this knob here. You can actually set the camera for automatic focus. If you push this button for auto manual, it'll toggle between auto or manual focus. And then it also has the same one push autofocus feature. I like to use that one. So in the manual setting, I push the one push autofocus button, and just like on our regular production cameras, it'll take over, do the focus, and then leave it set just like how you've got it there. And you can zoom back out and frame up your shot after that. Now we're going to go into the one more thing about doing your camera adjustments, is how to do a preset. Now this is actually the way that you can make things a little bit too complicated for your studio shoot. The simplest way to go is you just set each camera and you just change between those cameras. But the system does have the capability to let you do a preset and maybe record a few different preset configurations for your camera, so that if you want to have it with this shot for this guest and then do another setting for a different guest, you can do presets. But it can be complicated if you keep changing between all the presets. You do too many presets, it's going to get too confusing. But let's still learn how to do a preset. You look for the button that says preset right in the middle there. You hold that down and you push one of our preset buttons. Just like setting the memory on your radio in the car, you push the preset button, flashes a few times, and now it's got that preset. So I put in a preset for button preset 1. If I move the controller over here, I go and get a different shot. I want to go right back to where I was before. Hitting preset 1 moves the camera right back into position. You could do, I guess, it says up to 16 presets. I think 2 might be enough for most people. So do maybe like 1 or 2 presets, and that'll be probably as complicated as you'd want to make it. 1 preset for each camera is nice, because then you could set a preset for each camera for like the normal setting on how you're working, and then if you ever get it adjusted a little bit different but you want to go back to how you were, you could go back to your preset 1 and go back to how you started that day. So that's how to do your presets. It will remember as part of the preset not only the positioning of the camera, but also your light and dark and your all your settings for the camera, exposure, white balance, and focus settings are all part of a preset. So even though you may have redone your white balance or your exposure for a different condition in the studio, if you hit that preset for the old settings, it's going to go right back to those old settings. That's about all I want to cover for the camera adjustments right now. And let's see, there was one other thing that we might want to talk about. We got our camera, and I think that's enough for now. Yeah. We'll go into more detail another time, but that's your introduction to the studio equipment. It takes a lot of practice to get this working smoothly, but at least that's gone over all the features and everything you'd want to know probably. So, okay.
All right, thanks, Tom. I think I can run a mini studio. Maybe I'll try and give it a shot.
Sounds good.
Alrighty. I just received an awesome class by Tom, and I think I'm ready to kind of go through this thing. So, but I'm going to give it in the layman's term on how to set up the mini studio here at Pololo Olelo. So usually what I do when I come in for a studio shoot is I figure out what the client is going to be shooting and what kind of equipment they're going to be needing. So when I come in, if they're going to be using the teleprompter, I would usually turn the teleprompter on, which is right here. That's the screen, but then you can, you know, turn on the Compix there, and then the Compix comes on, and then there's actually the teleprompter's coming on too. And here's the other button for okay, so teleprompter screen. So we would set up the teleprompter, which is powering up. We turned on the Compix, which Tom had said earlier. That's what puts the titles across the bottom of the screen, or it puts up images that you want to appear on the TV. So,
or
if
beginning title slate,
or beginning the opening slate or the closing slates and credits all run through this machine. So we powered the Compix on. We powered the teleprompter. If they need the teleprompter or script, the teleprompter then appears on camera number 2, and camera number 2 is where they look at, and it will run on a reverse screen so that the guy can read the script. So that all goes into the teleprompter computer. Let's focus on the Compix and the graphics here, and this is where you go. You turn the screen on, and you want to find the program that says GenCG, GENCG. That's still loading, I guess. Okay, and now these are Windows-based programs. Most of the things you use in Olelo are Mac based, but this one here is Windows. So those of you that are familiar with Microsoft Windows, this will be familiar. So we open up GenCG Compix, and you'll see it loading up. And this is where you'll find, or you can create your titles and the designs and everything, or you can open up an existing program. So we'll go here and we'll find so right here we have an existing program that we're trying to open up. And it's loading. Okay, so if you take a look here, we have this show called Voices of Resistance, World Can't Wait. So they have an opening title screen here. They have some other titles on top of here that they use. Here's their lower thirds. So you can create the background design, and then you can put in the letters and the titles, and you can even change the font. So it's all done here, and it's controlled from down here in this area. So this is where you do your Compix, okay? And then so once you get it all set up, then you can start playing it onto your program. Okay? So I think we'll end there with the Compix for now. Yeah. But that's basically how you do it, and you know, if you want to design your own, you can come in and spend more time on designing your own templates and stuff. Okay, so let's exit out of there. And so that's your Compix graphics. So the next thing I would come in and do is then I would turn on the Anycast, which it's on already, but the power button is here. Okay, on the side is the power button for the Anycast. You turn that on, and this will power up. And then you would turn on the unit control, and the power button is located behind here on the unit remote control unit. Okay, you want to be very careful with this unit here, because this is the most sensitive part, is this one gray cable here. Okay, you don't want to be pulling on this because it's attached by little skinny wires, and once that's torn, your cameras won't work. Okay, but you power on, and here's your cameras. Tom had already gone through on how to control the cameras, but we're just showing you how to power it up. I then like to power up this editing controller because it allows me to see the time that's being counted down. Okay, and that coincides with this timer. Or actually this coincides with the timer on the deck. This right here coincides with the timer in the clock. So here you have a reset button to reset it to 0, or you can set it to preset, which was 7 minutes. You can adjust the timer here to what you want, and then you set reset or preset is 42 minutes, and you can have it count up, okay, or stop and you have it count down.
Cool.
And it's all controlled here, and they can see it inside.
Sure.
And we stop it and put it back to preset. Then I come here and then I power on the audio board, which is powered on here. I make sure to check all my settings are done, masters are up. Okay, like how we were told by Tom earlier. I then power on the speaker so that I can hear what's going on in there. And I power on the monitor that's here, and that's usually the ones I work with. Then I come here and I power on the DVC Pro tape deck, which is right here. You power it on and it should all light up. You can insert your tape inside there, make sure it's rewound. You can make sure that you turn it off, turn it on to make sure you zero out the tape. You can run a minute of black on here by fade to black, pull your sound down and press record. Play record on here so that it records 1 minute. Then you can press stop. There's also a way to do the assemble edit on here, which we'll let Tom explain that in his next class when he comes in. So far we've turned on the teleprompter, the Compex, the Anycast, the switcher, the editing controller, and the audio board. So there's so many things here that you got to turn on, plus the monitor and the speaker, and then your DVC Pro. So once this is all set up, then I then move into the studio. So once we get into the studio, what I like to do is I then turn on the studio lights, which are located here. You can flip up, usually blue and green will turn on these lights over here, and I think the red ones are set up to turn on the lights for the green screen, which we're not using today. So blue and green for the main studio, and so that's got to be powered on. But then you got to go to each camera, each robotic camera, and they all have a power switch, which is located down the bottom. And you have to turn on each one for each camera, and you'll see the camera start moving and zeroing itself out. That way you know it's on. And once 1, 2, 3 cameras are on, then you know that you can start seeing picture that's on the other end. Then we go here and then we turn on the program monitor to make sure if they want to see themselves, or if they don't want to see themselves, we turn it off. Here's where the lavaliers are located at for 1, 2, 3, 4 people. We take them out of here. We can make sure the batteries are in. And then we take them to the snake, which was talked about earlier, and we plug in 1, 2, 3, 4 mics or whatever you want to plug in. And then you set the chairs up 1, 2, 3, or 4 if you have a 4th guest. And of course you power on the speaker inside here. And once all that is set up with 4 microphones, the lights, the cameras are all powered on, the monitor, then you're ready to bring the talent in and sit them down. And then you can go on to the control room and you can start looking at all your stuff, setting your camera, setting up your Compex, and whatnot. And one last thing too, and usually the clients who use it will design their set. You can hang your different tapestries or bring plants on and whatnot and design it how you want. So that's pretty much how you walk through and set it up in layman's term.
For a small price, I can install this little blue button to get you down.